Fantastic. Okay, so I brought you guys here today to talk a little about your backgrounds in theatre and to get some advice for emerging creative talent who want to work both behind the camera, behind the production, and in front of it as well. So from a performer level and a tech level. So to start off, let's start with Anthony. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself and your background in theatre and the arts, please? Please, Anthony.
please. Yeah, of course, man. So I started, as most people do, going to acting lessons and stuff like that as a young person, and developed an interest in theatre and performance. After I did a work experience in a booking office in Hull, I got the opportunity to start working there full time after that. Not necessarily full time, it was casual basis, I suppose. And then after I left college, I was looking for more work and started to work in the backstage realm of that, and developed a lot of skills from that point. After that, in 2008, I went to university to study a degree in acting, so that I had an understanding and I guess an attempt to try and become an actor. A working actor at that point. And what I actually found was that I was doing a lot of acting jobs, but I was also merging that with the technician jobs, and a lot of people were hiring me to act as well as operate tech and stuff like that. And then after settling down a little bit more, and doing some awesome tech stuff at the Lowry and stuff like that, which I'll go into later, I'm sure. I went back to the Hull City Hall and Hull New Theatre as the chief technician. So sort of the highest on the floor position there that's actually sort of working with the production companies to put on large scale theatre events. So you're because it's two venues, I have one venue that primarily focuses in musicals and such, and one that deals with more rock and roll. And orchestras and stuff like that. So that's the brief overview of me.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much. You sound a little bit like a robot to me, Anthony. It's quite nice. It's quite. You sound like a Dalek.
A Dalek.
So while I get Kiran to introduce himself to me for probably the millionth time to myself, but for people that are fresh to Kiran and his beautiful cheekbones, you can sort your audio out. And Kiran, can you tell me a little bit about your background in theatre and the arts as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm kind of surprised that me and Anthony haven't crossed paths professionally, strangely, because I didn't know your background, Anthony. That's really interesting. I know the things you do with Dom, and I know the Give Me a Hole Yeah podcast, but I don't know your theatre background. That's really interesting. Okay, so kind of similar. I didn't really come into doing anything in theatre until I was in my late teenage life, because I didn't go to acting classes or anything like that. I just like making stuff up. I'm a writer, really, predominantly. In terms of everything I do has a bit of that in, but I like making things, and it's kind of what you work with what you've got. So I like to make stuff, and you can write wherever you are. So that was something I did, but it turns out that's not the only thing I like doing. And if sometimes you want to work visually, I'm not the most amazing painter. So I was looking for other media that I could work in as a teenager and stuff I could do with other people, because I like collaborating, and theatre seemed like a pretty natural neck of the woods to fall into. I do act. I'm not a professional actor. I'm in a lot of my own things, some of which are professional productions. I'm not in anybody else's things, and I hire in and work with lots of actors on stuff. My education is in theatre. I'm doing a PhD in theatre at the moment. I'm nearly finished. I've got a master's in theatre and a BA in theatre, all from up here. And they've all been practical. They're not like, they're research-based, but they're not theory. A lot of it's practice-based. I run a company called Via Performance, where we started out as a ensemble touring theatre company, making work in the UK and Europe and a bit elsewhere. Big kind of ensemble dance theatre pieces. So it's kind of in the name, bit of dance, bit of text, big sort of 20-30 person shows with lots of costume and lights and music, and lots of live music, because as we know from the stuff we do, I play in bands. And yeah, again, bit of a jack of all trades. So, a lot of mixing of different things together. As I found when I was doing my degrees, and likewise with producing this sort of work and touring it, it's cheaper unfortunately for the likes of me and you, Anthony, and the rest of our professional lives, it's cheaper if you don't have to hire a technical lead on it and you can do it yourself. So I ended up being basically the head of production for the company that I run. I'm creative director now, and was previously one of the directors and head of production, sort of as a bracket that a lot of my work fell into. And very similar to what Anthony was talking about before, I oversee the production of theatre works. Via Performance now do a lot of work where we facilitate for other people, so other artists who don't have the technical proficiency in-house to do that. If they want big light shows, they want lots of AV, so lots of audiovisual stuff. We design it and then sometimes implement it for them. And we do a lot of work with art galleries and museums and things like that as well, where they want similar kinds of stuff. Lots of projection these days. So that's basically what I do. And the rest of the time, to make money when I haven't been working for my own company or freelance, a lot like Anthony, I manage venues and I teach theatre, but I teach the technical production side of theatre at a university up here. So.
Absolutely. One of the sort of key things as well, the reason why I have brought you together is obviously we're working in the north of England, working in Yorkshire predominantly. Now, obviously, when we were sort of starting our careers in the media and creative industries, it was very London centric, still is to a point. But you have been in other places. You have travelled around the UK, Europe in some cases, to hone your craft. So, respectively, have you found it an uphill battle to build a career in Yorkshire and the north of England, and tell me about your experiences in making a living in theatre, in creative work on a wider level, being based in Yorkshire and the north?
So obviously I'll go first. Obviously I went to university in Northampton and lived as a struggling actor and technician in Nottingham for a while. The one thing that I'd say that Yorkshire offers is a real helping hand to young adults, in that there's always people that are willing to offer the support. It's quite interesting, Kiran, because you sort of are now working in an education background, and that's something that I never had for getting into technical theatre. I learned by watching people and saying, can you teach me a little bit more? And I think that sort of attitude is actually the reason that I've got to where I am today. And while I think there's certainly nowadays there's a lot more technical theatre courses. I know 20 years ago, give or take a few years, 20 years ago, there wasn't as many theatre technical courses. And actually, by helping people, you get a real, you whatever you put in, you get given back, be that through education, be that through financial reward. And we're constantly learning every day. I mean, I've worked in the industry now for a long time and constantly learning stuff off people and stuff like that. What do you think, Kiran?
I'd completely agree, to be honest. And, educational, institutional environment or not, I didn't do a technical theatre degree. Mine was theatre making, mostly writing and performance. And I did the exact same thing as you turn up to things and you say, can you show me how to do this thing? Or you say, can I learn how to do this thing? Whether you think it's going to be useful to you or not. To address the thing of uphill struggle, I won't mince my words on it. It's not like a parent pleaser. For instance, when you work in an educational environment, say when kids want to study theatre, and then parents are like, okay, what's the careers? And you're like, have you looked at the history of theatre? It had a very brief golden period where there were like lots of careers in it, but then TV happened. No, so but there's a lot of transferable skills, is my way of putting it, and it's an uphill struggle if you lots of careers are an uphill struggle. I think that's probably my attitude. Sounds a bit cynical, but it's really not. I'm a very optimistic person. I just think work's hard and you have to do it. So and that's how it works. There isn't really a free lunch, and theatres are particularly hard to acquire lunch, but it's really satisfying doing it because half the time you're working on things you actually care about. If you're on the performing end of it, you usually are, but you also end up doing lots of very strange jobs on the side to make ends meet while you're looking for the jobs that you love, until you establish something. I mean, I I'm 30, 31, and so I was setting up about 10 years ago, and then it was a really good time to start a company. There were lots of, I say lots, there weren't, because people then were saying that there weren't as many as previously, grants and opportunities and arts council money, which was where I, started making work, was on funded projects, working with other people on funded projects and applying for funding. And now it's a little bit more mercenary and it's a little bit more ticket based than it was 10 years ago. But 10 years ago, people were telling me, oh, it's much more ticket based now than it was 10 years previously in the 90s. I think you just got to grift. It's like, if you love the arts and you actually want a career in it, you better be a grifter too. And that's kind of what I tell people, people's parents is, son or daughter, whatever, do you work hard? If you do, you can totally succeed. But you've got to put work in.
I suppose that's one of the things as well about being a Yorkshire-based artist, that actually you can get a lot of work if you do work hard and you put in that graft. You can get work all over the country, because I've worked all over the country. I assume you have, Kiran. And word of mouth travels, and especially when you're doing some interesting stuff and people are paying attention, people start to come to you and ask you to go places. And once you get to that point, like it's a really nice position to be in.
Yeah, I completely agree. And like you say, word of mouth is all my business is word of mouth. I don't market, except people see it. I suppose that's kind of marketing. But it's all been word of mouth, and it's all client based. I love it. Running a company is in doing this sort of thing is certainly what I enjoy. So, you and I have slightly different backgrounds. It's interesting. I'd love to know what your sort of perspective is on working in the professional theatre environment up north, because I work more in the educational theatre environment. Well, not educational theatre, but in the educational institution side of teaching theatre when it comes to up north. But that's
as opposed to sort of commercial theatre, which is my sort of background at the minute. But then one of the things that I love more than anything is that sort of creative theatre, and actually getting to not work with light anymore, but start working with shadows, and then you can create some really interesting stuff. But anyway, that's a creative talk, Tom.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's obviously a lot of exciting stuff there. And you talk about, the opportunities that are available to you both and things you've done. Talk about some of your career highlights. Like I say, I won't necessarily start with one person or the other, but talk about some career highlights and things that you've been able to do creatively or otherwise as part of the theatre industry.
You can take that one, Kiran.
Sure, yeah. Creative highlights. I would say that, there's lots. Theatre festivals are great. I've always enjoyed touring to festivals. It's nice as opposed to the band touring model where you're in a different place every night, which is fun in its own way, but stressful. As theatre festivals are great. They run for, say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, depending on what festival you're at. Never done a full 6-week run of the Fringe, done 3-4 weeks a few times. Edinburgh Fringe is what everyone says about it. It's a good laugh. It's expensive. It's stressful, but it's really good fun, and that's touring. Sibiu in Romania was really pretty amazing. Going over to Australia and doing stuff there has been very similar. So touring has been in general. But really, in terms of what I love and what I've got the most out of is recruiting a cast of people and then divide. A lot of our theatres devise, so I don't just hand people a text or whatever and then get them to enact it. It's more like we get together and make a show. But recruiting people, especially people I've taught or who I studied with or who were around at the same time I've been studying, which has been for 10 years, and working with them on something that's commercial, but where the aim isn't the commercial element, it's just got to pay for itself, where the aim is to create something that has purpose and that's interesting to other people for whatever reason. It might be because it's inspiring, it might be because it's entertaining, whatever, but to create something that has a message or a purpose and get it out there. Just honestly, the act of making your own stuff and putting it out, I say growing up that I could have done all sorts of things. I could have gone and been like a bathroom fitter and made people's bathrooms, but I don't know that I would have got the exact same sort of in self-gratification out of making someone's bathroom that I do out of creating a really dynamic piece of theatre and then getting a bunch of people to come and see it. So it's the working with other people side though, that really is a highlight throughout.
The collaboration, yeah. Anthony?
I mean, it's difficult because there's different sort of highlights, especially doing what I've sort of done, where I've come. I mean, nowadays I've worked with people ranging from like Placebo to Robert Plant and all these sort of incredible bands, which is really exciting. But then like I've also done like work with Slade and loads of bands and stuff like that, which is really cool. You know, to it's funny because you've worked with so many and you forget half of them because there's so many like different things that you've done. Then like working in with sort of big musicals like the School of Rock musicals that I did recently and stuff like that, like that's really cool. And then but really the real career highlights for me are where you've done much smaller scale stuff, but it's had more of you invested in it. I mean, when I'm putting on a Robert Plant show or a big musician, etc., like I'm not that involved in it. It's sort of a process of assisting them in putting on the show as opposed to doing it yourself. But when, I mean, Kiran talked a little bit about festivals there, and one of the things that I love is the National Student Drama Festival, and I think that that's a really good way for young people to share their skills. And I was asked as a slightly older, I mean, I'd already sort of been working in the industry. I was asked to go and be a lighting designer for a piece and created a lighting design for that show that ended up winning the award for the best lighting designer at this festival, which has some of the best pieces of theatre all being brought together. And whilst I didn't have the budget, I created something with very little. So I'm very proud of that. And then like working at the Lowry off the back of that, really, when I was the lighting designer for South, and being able to really sort of create something interesting, work really closely with designers to ensure that your lighting design is becoming part of a wider story, and you're also telling stories within that lighting design, I think is the ultimate reward. And when you get an audience that sees that, and not always, sometimes you have these ideas. I think that's an important thing for young people to hear. You have these ideas that you want to get across, and sometimes it's impossible. But if you work hard to get what you can, an idea can form into something else that can be brilliant and creatively fulfilling as well. So I think that's sort of my career highlights, I guess. I think probably more. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, there's quite a few there. I mean, you
to
mentioned
chip in.
go on, yeah.
Sorry.
No,
I just thought it'd be interesting. It sounds like a lot like me and a lot like most people who've not bailed out of theatre to do something else because they haven't been successful first few times or because they've had to, which is completely understandable if it's financial or whatever. The longer you stick around, it sounds like you've had similar experience to me, Anthony. What you realize is it's kind of more fulfilling than doing a lot of other things, right? Like,
absolutely,
it's a really fulfilling thing to do.
It is, and whilst it's very intimidating at first, Kiran, it's like once you get past that and you start to understand what you're doing, and you can let your creativeness go, be that on a daily level, be that on a weekly run, you know, or whatever it is, creating something for a local dance show, you know, whatever. It can be so fulfilling once you get to that point and once you get past them sort of steps. And it really is just about going up to people, working with them, and having different experiences, you know. And I've had a bit of experience with TV and some serious like problems that I had that could have cost millions of pounds. But you know, work through it and figure it out, and that'll never happen again, you know. And that's the learning experience. And as you know, Kiran, with any sort of production or creativity, we're constantly learning, man, and constantly sort of reanalyzing ourselves as well. I think that's important to take a step back and to look at what you're doing, what you're creating, and how was it, how could you have done it better, as well as what you did well, because a lot of people don't give themselves enough credit for what they're actually doing.
Yeah, 3 or 4 more questions now then for you both, because again, stuff keeps coming up for me. One of the things, you both got some background in working with young people. Obviously, Kiran, you're working academically currently. I know you've done some work with young people in the past, Anthony. What do you want to see from anybody who wants to get into either, mainly the tech side, but also in theatre in general and the arts? What do you want to see? But also, because this doesn't always get covered, what mistakes should people avoid doing? What things do you not want to see from anybody who is interested in the theatre and might come to either of you for advice and support. Do you want to start with Anthony? Should we?
Yeah, rock and roll. I think that people, I think eagerness is, but then there's also a balance in that with being too eager and too over the top. Sometimes because we are working in industries that that costs money ultimately, and it needs to be. I need to achieve my vision, right? And if you're going to help me, I will help you. But then there also comes a time crunch where I just need what I'm asking to happen. And we can go for a talk about it in the pub later on, and I'll tell you exactly why we did it like that. But at that point, it needs to happen as opposed to the sort of question. So I think that's kind of a little thing that I've had experience with recently. But eagerness in general is so important, and that's how you learn. That's how you get experience, and you can learn different things from different people, even if it's negative things that you don't want to take on yourself. You can learn that from having that experience, and I think that's so important.
Absolutely. Kiran, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that entirely. Quit bitching, be present. That's probably the best thing that I can say. Theatre, unsurprisingly, it's full of drama. Not just front of house. In fact, actually backstage just as much. Full of prima donnas and people who have no right being prima donnas because they haven't really achieved anything yet. And you can do that maybe when you've got like fans. And you'd still be a knobhead. So how about just don't, and instead turn up and be engaged and attentive and on time and clean and not too hungover, and you'll immediately be better than 80% of the other people in the room. And that probably doesn't just apply to theatre. That's probably true in most jobs. But in all seriousness, I mean, I work with young people, and that's exactly what I tell them. Be switched on to it, plugged in. And if there's something you really love, tell people about it. But as I think you were it sounded like you were getting at, Anthony, it's hard. A lot of people who are drawn to drama are very, extroverted. Try not to be too overbearing with the stuff. I struggle with that. But be engaged. So yeah.
It's funny, Kiran, because exactly what you say. Like I've working quite high in my position. I don't necessarily say to people that are sat down not doing anything. I'm not necessarily going to tell you that what you're doing is wrong, but I will make a note of it. And the next time I need to call a person in, the person will be the person that was attentive, that was next to me by my side, and that was helping me. And they're the people who go for it. So even if there's nothing going on, just keep attentive to the environment. I mean, and as we know, it's a dangerous environment as well. So sitting around doesn't help anyone. And it also annoys me because I'm like, well, I'm doing all this work. What are you guys doing? To be blunt, sorry, I'm just
that's one of the things that we're trying to do with this, and I think people can people can kind of get wrapped up in what to do and advice and support, which is lovely, but I think it's important to talk about the mistakes as well and things that people can do wrong, because again, sometimes that gets glossed over in favor of creating a nice shiny mystique around. So go on.
Theatre's kind of like a Village People video, which might mean nothing to some of the people listening, I guess. But it's like a construction site and a war zone, but you're in costume. And it's as dangerous as maybe not a war zone. It's as dangerous as a construction site because you're hanging off things. You're up high. You move in quickly. There's lots going on. It's dark. There's scaffolding everywhere. As far as I'm concerned, it's a dark construction site. Whether you're on stage as a performer or you're doing a technical role, so. Absolutely, you touched on on being engaged, not just because it's good practice, but also because it's a dangerous environment.
Very dangerous, yeah.
That's where a lot of mistakes. Most of the mistakes I see, if they're not about people being unnecessarily difficult with one another interpersonally, which happens everywhere, they're about people doing stuff in a way that isn't professional or safe for the people around them. That's the majority of the mistakes I observe on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and the other really important thing is if you don't know something, ask, because I'd rather you ask than have to sort out the mess that it can create. especially when that can potentially injure someone. And that's not what we want. So if you don't know something, if you're unsure of something, just ask, man. Just ask.
Absolutely. And you know this stuff now. You both know this stuff now. Based on your experiences, based on your traveling. But and you guys will have both heard me use this before, but I think it works here. How have you changed and developed through your career? What have you learned about yourself from the very beginnings of your time in the theatre industry up until now? How have you both changed and developed? If we start with Kiran this time.
I think when I started, although it can be very intimidating, I personally respond quite well to things that are intimidating, and I tend to throw myself in. But when I started, I say quite well. What I mean is I'm not put off by them. And when I started, I think I thought I was better than I actually am now, if that makes sense. And I certainly wasn't as good as I am now at what I do when I started, if that makes sense. I was a bit I was probably arrogant, like a lot of young people are. And that's not a bad thing, because it can carry you in with the momentum to get going. But the thing that I think has changed the most about me is I've learned, and I've had to learn, to take criticism. As someone who makes stuff that gets reviews in newspapers and it's my name on it, as opposed to, you can get away with it sometimes when you're in the production end, and I have done many times, where you're not going to get named in the paper, but like you can do a name search and find good and bad reviews of things that I've done, and sometimes they're not very nice and not very well thought through, and sometimes they are, and you read it and you go, oh, actually, fair point. And you get criticized by audience. They say you're great, they say you're crap. You have to decipher what that means and actually learn how to put that into practice to make your own work better, how to have a thick skin as well. And in the educational world, which is where most of it's happened, Jesus Christ, the amount, criticism, man. Do a PhD, it's painful. Don't do a PhD, it's painful. But yeah, and because it's in theatre, a lot of it is direct criticism of the work, and it's brutal. And then you have to pull it apart and put it back together. And honestly, that's the thing that I think has changed the most for me, is I've really gone from being someone who struggled to take such harsh criticism as you're going to get, to someone that now, I'd say, welcomes it. I don't welcome it like singing and dancing, but literally I do welcome it singing and dancing, but I don't welcome it like with open arms and a big smile. I'm like, oh, here it comes. But it's always nice when it's like 5 stars. That's great. And then, then the rest of it, you have to learn how to make your own stuff better, and no one's really going to help you unless you pay them.
I think for me, it's directness. I've got very direct in my older age.
Yeah.
Oh dear. Yeah, from the podcast. No, I'm just very direct now. I'm just like, let's not mess about. This is what I want. This is what I need. But I've also learned to let go of some stuff that was causing stress to the point of anxiety and potential mental health problems that I was having in the past, where you'd get so fixated on something that wasn't actually that important, and the wider picture was hurt because you didn't actually have the time to do the more important thing. So I think that sort of, and that relates in itself to directness as well, sort of being able to filter out what's important, what's not important, how am I going to achieve this, and how can I ensure that I have myself enough time to be able to program X, Y, and Z. But how can I get a break today, right? Because we all do it, especially creatives. We work through our breaks. We're constantly thinking. We get home on a night and we go to sleep thinking about the work that we're doing. But actually, how do I get a break without cutting corners? So about not getting necessarily hung up on them tiny details and just looking at the bigger picture, I think is something that I've learned.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you both for your contributions as well on that, because I think it's really nice to get your viewpoints. Another question that I think is relatable, that I do use in interviews a lot, because and it comes up a lot when we speak to young people, is they talk about success, and I wanted to ask you both individually. We'll start with Anthony this time. How do you define success, and what does it mean to you?
Well, for me, success is about being happy in who you are, happy in your life, happy be it work, outside personal, and just trying to live life. You know, I don't live to work; I work to live. And whilst I have a good time with work and try and enjoy it, I also party hard and run a podcast with my friend Dom. Or give me a whole yeah, which you know, and that's important to me. That's another thing, like being able to have things outside of work, which are a way of expressing yourselves. I'm sure you guys have experience with that as well, Kieran.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I have a criminal sort of problem with monetizing, or at least ending up qualifying now. Almost everything I do as a hobby becomes work, which is why I've tried to recently get back into stuff that like really you can't turn into a job, you know, like which there's not much of these days.
Like an obscure doom metal band.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, that like that, yeah. I couldn't think of any names. Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's very true. I mean, in regards to what you were saying about, you know, living not living to work, which is difficult because the work-life balance is very much non-existent in the creative industries, which is not to say that's not the case elsewhere as well. It's just it's difficult sometimes in our industry because you can still, without it being unprofessional, you can still be going to the pub after work and still doing work. You can still be, you know, hanging out with your mates and you're on a night out and you're still doing work. You're talking about it, you know. So yeah, it can be hard to define where those lines are. In regards to my perspective on success, I think because it's so variable depending on the individual, like, and for me, because I'm doing lots of different things and it's variable in my own life, it's like, did I have goals going in to something? And if I did, am I keeping an eye on what those goals were? Because they could be different for different things. Sometimes the goal is to have fun and break even so that you're not taking money out of your own back pocket to have fun. I've said to people before when touring with them, like, you know, this is an abstract piece of like contemporary art theatre. It's probably not going to make any money, but we might get some good reputation that down the line people will be like, oh, we'll give you more work because you did this thing. But, you know, tempering their expectations of what success is around money is important. But by the same token, on plenty of projects, my goal is to make money because I need the money to develop more work and do R&D, you know. And it's not like I don't live for nice things. I live quite a comfortable lifestyle, and I like making money doing the things that I do. It's gratifying. Any questions about the value of money as a concept aside, it's you need to eat and you need to have holidays and do stuff, and I make no bones about that. So I think it depends on what your gauge for success is on project by project basis, which means if you don't have goals going in, then you're just floundering around. So for me, success is, am I attaining the goals on this very specific project per project that I'm working on? What were the goals that I had going in? Have I achieved them? Am I keeping an eye on it in case they change partway through? So I'm not trying to strive for a goal that doesn't mean anything to me anymore, because then I'll finish the thing and it'll feel hollow. So yeah.
Well said.
Absolutely. A couple more questions to finish off then now. Obviously, as struggling creatives, we all, you know, you mentioned living to work, working to live, and making sure that you have time and space for yourself. Outside of work, you know, who are the people, what are the things that motivate you, and what is your message to those people who have got behind you in your careers, you know, from the very beginning and will continue to do so as you go forward? Anthony, you want to start?
It's family, friend, and partners. But I guess one of the most difficult things about working in this industry for me is the hours are all over the place, and it's very difficult at times to be able to see friends. It's very difficult at times to have the energy to go out. It's difficult to see family. You miss a lot of occasions because our lives are dictated by a performance at times, and that's why it's so important, again, as I was sort of alluding to earlier, to make sure that you can distinguish between work and play. So I think from that point of view, like my family, my friends, my loved ones have had to put up with a lot and had to make sacrifices because of my work. So I'll forever be grateful of that. But I mean, like, we could talk about me and you, Dom. We didn't talk for 2 years while I was at university, and then we meet back up, and it's the same as it always was. And that's the way I've had to keep my relationships, because of the hours of work. And I think that that's something that any young person looking at going into the creative industry should definitely look at, because it does. Sorry to be the downer.
No, this is what we're about. It's important to do that, I think.
Yeah, I think it does impact all of them relationships.
Absolutely. Kiran, your thoughts?
I couldn't agree more. I think so as to not just say the exact same thing, because I really do think, you know, the your partners, whoever they are, in life that aren't your collaborators, you know, are fundamentally like the people to be thanked for putting up with the way that you have to work to be whatever we were just talking about with success. To attain your goals in this industry, the people around you have to put up with a lot. So I'll echo what you said, Anthony, and then to tack on to that, I think patience of collaborators, you know, patient collaborators, but also collaborators who push you when you need pushing to get off one project where you're spending too much time onto another thing. You are one of them, Dom. You know, you're a very patient collaborator. I am a patient collaborator, I think, with some of my other collaborators, and some of them are very patient with me. But equally, it's not patient to the point of not pushing to do more. And I have a lot of thanks for, I have a lot of thanks to, or I owe a lot of thanks to the people I'm around to remind me when I'm focused really intently on one project that I also have other things to be doing. And sometimes that's really helpful, because when you move between, I don't know what you folks are like, but well, I do know what you're like, but for the listener, they may not know. I think we all are people that work across a range of simultaneous projects rather than one thing at a time. And sometimes when you're working on one of those things, you can be highly distracted by how focused you are on it from the rest of life. So whether it's your partner in, you know, your romantic life, or your partner as a collaborator, the people that you choose to be around and who choose to be around you, reminding you that you need to do stuff, I owe them a lot of thanks, because otherwise I'd just be working on one thing at a time at the expense of everything else. So yeah, and it keeps everything fresh. So
absolutely. Well, you know, I'm very, very proud to know both of you. I think you're both, you know, fantastic creatives and great people. And, you know, it's been a pleasure to sit down and bring you both together for this sort of insight into working into the creative industries, the theatre industry in Yorkshire and the north of England. Before we finish, it can be work related, can be anything. Where can people find you? Are there any projects you want to plug? Anything going on at the moment you want to tell people about? Plug away.
Kiran, I feel like we've been set up for a trap here, because we both have projects with Dom, which he's clearly trying to plug right now. So Dom, why don't you just not let us talk, and you can plug the projects for us? How about that?
Well, I mean, I could do that, absolutely, but then, you know, there might be something else. I might be expecting what you're going to say, but it might not be what you have planned. So why don't you start, Kiran, since you're less argumentative?
Okay, I'll try not to plug our work yet, because we can do that in a minute. I am not working on anything commercially that is my own piece of theatre that I'm the writer, director, producer, or whatever of at the moment, because I'm in the back end of a PhD where it's all research based. And given the situation with COVID, I'm not really inviting big audiences to come and look at it. Otherwise, I would say come and see it. That being said, subsequent to that, I intend to be back to doing more commercial work where I'm in the driving seat. I am, however, doing lots of facilitation for arts festivals and museums and galleries. So if anyone listening needs projection mapping or project management for a big AV thing that's situated in the arts rather than in the IT world, come and look me up. You can Google my name. It's hard to spell, but I'm sure it'll be in the description for this. And the company that I run is called Fire Performance. And then there's lots of stuff that I'm doing with Dom in the music world, but we can plug that in a minute. What about you, Anthony?
Absolutely. Go ahead, Anthony.
Me, I don't have a lot going on apart from what Dom's going to plug. So I don't think that I need to plug. Catch me on Twitter, Anthony Neylon, but I don't use it.
That was it. I was trying to get you to plug your social media. Because
you can follow me
yeah.
at Give Me a Hull, yeah. Is it at Give Me a Hull, yeah, on Twitter?
Give me a Hull, yeah, and also Anthony Neylon. You know, you might.
Yeah, but I don't use either of them.
But you should use it.
But Dom does it all for me, so it's all fine.
I will start doing it for you if you want. I'll be your social media consultant. Absolutely.
You're right. You're my PA, baby.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about that off camera. Yeah. Brilliant. So yeah. So we have me and Kiran have Mary in the Ram, a wonderful post-pro project. You can Google that. We also have a project called The Thing, which is a drone and doom metal project. We have our first show coming up soon. But anyway, and myself and Anthony have Give Me a Hull, yeah, which is a wrestling themed podcast. We do live streams and stuff. But this interview wasn't about me. It was never about me. It was about you guys. So thank you so much for making the time and effort to talk to me. It's lovely bringing people that I know and care about and respect together for things like this. And I hope to do more of it. So thank you for your time. And I will see you again really soon.